Naruto, the franchise that every 12-year-old lost their minds over it at least once. Except me. I did not grow up with Naruto. I was cursed to only have access to an international version of Cartoon Network that didn't have a Toonami block as a result of not living in the US. So unfortunately, I wasn't exposed to, well, not only Naruto but lots of Japanese cartoons. I also couldn't watch it online because I didn't have consistent and reliable internet access until I was probably 17, and by that point, Naruto's popularity kind of dipped. I was not really interested in giving it a look, and even now I'm still not interested. This series is way too long for me to sit through. I don't picture myself watching nearly 700 episodes anytime soon, and I'm not at all invested in the medium of manga. But despite all of that, I do have some knowledge of the Naruto series because, well, one, it's popular as hell, and two, I do have some experience with the video games, and today I'm gonna review the games that made me invest in this franchise the most: Ultimate Ninja 3, 4, and 5 for PlayStation 2. I'm skipping the first two ones because I don't currently own them and I've never played them, so I kind of don't care. I'm sure they're fine, but you know. Before I bought Ultimate Ninja 3, which was earlier this year, I was already accustomed to the advanced mechanics of the Storm games, which left me very concerned. I was afraid I would find Ultimate Ninja 3 to be too outdated, especially because it's the oldest among the PS2 games I own. But I was surprised at how I still ended up enjoying the PS2 mechanics. There are aspects worth appreciating about the battles. I think there's more individualism among the different players you can use. For instance, there are many players that have a range of techniques depending on what directional button you're holding, which I'm not saying that isn't the case in the Storm games, but with the PS2 games, I feel like the difference in technique is more significant. Tenten is a good example of how she changes attack weapons depending on the direction and how different every weapon is. And as for the Jutsu, while it does bother me that I have to perform 3 clicks in order to activate it, despite the fact that I can activate Ultimate Jutsu by clicking 2 buttons, I do admire how there are some players where you can choose the intensity of the impact depending on how long you hold the circle button. And then later in Ultimate Ninja 5, if you pick a player like, let's say, Hinata, you could control how many hits you would give to your opponent every time you activated her jutsu by repeatedly pressing circle. Now, I will say that I'm not very into the whole rock paper scissors thing and the ongoing substitution jutsu until someone gets hit, and I also prefer 3-dimensional battlefields, but at least I can appreciate how I can have a different but still great experience when I play with an inferior console. Although playing Ultimate Ninja 3 is definitely not the best option because of how inferior the graphics are. Aside from Ultimate Contest and the stuff that you can buy and collect, like music and figurines, pretty much everything you can do in this game you could very easily do in Ultimate Ninja 4. For the game's sake, I'm going to first talk about the game mode that's exclusive to Ultimate Ninja 3, Ultimate Contest. It consists of a tournament called Jonin vs Genin, created by Tsunade, in which in order to win, you have to collect the highest number of crystals that give you points, and you pretty much have to fight against everyone so that you can take their crystals, and that's what Naruto was initially doing, but over the course of the tournament, he would encounter several players that would offer him the crystals, either for lack of interest in winning the contest or out of gratitude. I mean, hell, Naruto ended up winning not for being stronger but because of his charm. From the very beginning, all he wanted was to fight against Kakashi and show his mad skills, and was so enthusiastic about it, which ended up leaving a bunch of people sympathetic towards him, including Kakashi himself, who ended up forfeiting just so Naruto would win. This game mode was definitely worth playing it. I learned more about how some characters behave, and you can still explore the world even after the tournament is over, as there are plenty of side missions you can do that will help you connect with this universe and unlock a bunch of stuff that could be useful in versus mode. But not only that, I had fun. It was fun fighting against multiple players, playing minigames with Might Guy, and there are some funny moments here and there. As for the second game mode, Hero's History, it was quite honestly hard to experience. The chapters were divided by major battles from the original series and they lacked context. It was very hard to follow every chapter in a coherent and linear way. I mean, to be fair, it was kind of my fault. I didn't play the previous games and you have the option of reading a detailed description of those chapters before opening them. although after reading them I'm pretty sure I would still think that those chapters didn't have enough context. I think it's only when you enter the Sasuke's retrieval arc that stuff becomes a little bit easier to follow, and if I had to guess, it's because it's the only arc that wasn't fully covered in the previous games. Not to mention, I was pretty mad at how they cut off a bunch of material. Like, we never got to see the other battles that occurred in the Chunin exams. I mean, I would have loved to see the Hinata vs Neji and Gaara vs Rock Lee fights. We only saw Naruto vs Neji, obviously because this mode was more centered on Naruto's journey, right until Sasuke's retrieval arc. I also have some issues with the audio. Now, this could be an issue with either my TV or my disc, but the volume of the characters' voices is too low. You can only really properly listen to what they're saying when there's no background music, because for some reason it's louder than the characters' voices. Another issue I have, and this is a problem that's still present in later games, I hate how I always have to press X to forward the dialogue. I generally do not see any point in making it like this. I very much focus on what the characters are saying, so it would be a lot more convenient if the dialogue would forward automatically. The reason why this bothers me so much is because, well, one, I have to constantly press X, and two, I want the character interactions to sound as natural as they can be, which is not something that's 100% easy to achieve when you're controlling the sentences in conversations. This especially to me because there were times when I thought a character had finished talking, and right after I realized he was not done speaking, I would forward the conversation and unintentionally interrupt his sentence. The only way to avoid this is waiting a couple of seconds just to see if the character is done speaking, and because I want the dialogue to sound as natural as possible, this is not an option. I eventually had to learn how to quickly identify when a character is done speaking, but this would have been a lot easier if it was automatic. As for the soundtrack, this is not my favorite out of the PS2 games. If we're going to also compare with the Storm games, this might be better than Storm 2, although I should probably state that me saying that Ultimate Ninja 3 has the least enjoyable soundtrack out of the PS2 games is really not an insult in my book. The composer did a great job with the music for these games. Also, this game does still have one of my favorite songs, which is titled Friend, and it ended up being recycled in later games. Overall, good game, definitely worth playing it. Ultimate Ninja 4, possibly my favorite among these. Actually, it might be 5, I don't know, I have to think really hard. Unlike the previous games, this is based on Naruto Shippuden, which takes place 3 years after the battle between Naruto and Sasuke. Although you don't have full access to all the characters as teenagers, I guess for most people the biggest tragedy is Sasuke, although for me, I'm more mad that I don't have Hinata as a teenager. And look, she's my favorite playable character, but I have trouble using her as a child because she sucks. One of her jutsu is medicine, which is pointless. That's not gonna help me attack anyone, and maybe it's because I'm more used to playing with her in Ultimate Ninja 5 since it's the game I played the most, especially back in 2011. I'm not accustomed to 8 trigrams 64 palms being activated by double clicking the upper button first, and because with most players the upper jutsu involves the angles changing sequence, I get really confused whenever I play with her and decide what jutsu to use. But anyway, in regards to the changes made, the graphics are obviously better, the colors look more vibrant, and there's Master Mode instead of Ultimate Contest, and whatever 1 and 2 had. Unlike Ultimate Contest, Master Mode recreates the events of the series, but not initially. At first, we experience the Black Shadow arc, a completely original story from the game, which is about Naruto trying to stop this little girl who was about to be a sacrifice for this demon called the Black Shadow, as every once in a while the tree-feeling village has to offer a sacrifice to this demon so that he can be appeased, otherwise he'll bring havoc to the village. I've read some comments from people stating that this arc was boring, but to be honest, I liked it. From the very beginning, the idea of a little child wasting her life so she can be a sacrifice was crushing and immediately held my attention. And then I got attached to Aoi and her mother as I learned more about them. After the entire storyline was complete and all that was left were the side missions, I immediately visited those characters to see how they were doing, and there was even an extra mission that brought closure to their stories. I also like how initially whenever you would visit the tree-filling village, you would hear this background music that sounded kinda sad, but after you defeat Black Shadow, they change it to a more peaceful and reassuring song. So, nice touch. Anyways, good arc, but let's get down to the real stuff, the Kazekage rescue arc. Naruto returns to the Hidden Leaf village, and now it's mapped differently. Unlike in Ultimate Contest where the village had a squared shape, here the streets look more linearly ramified, and given how later games adapted a map that's loosely similar to this, I'm going to assume that this is a more accurate depiction of the village. I do appreciate how the travels are less jump cutting and requires more walking. I can actually enter or leave the Hidden Leaf gate and see it for myself, and there are also more villages you can visit by walking. But there is one thing that both games succeeded at, and that is having well-designed off-field background art. Even in territories where you can't enter, they look like real places that are possible to interact with, and not something cheaply put together to fill the walls. Watching Naruto catching up with his friends was definitely something endearing and pleasant to see. They've grown up and are now stronger than before. Hell, Naruto and Sakura succeeded at snatching Kakashi's bell, unlike before, although this is not news to anyone who read the manga or watched the anime. The main storyline for this arc is that Gaara was kidnapped by Deidara and Sasori, and now Team 7 are in charge of rescuing him, and then later Guy's team was sent to help them. Unfortunately, this plotline was interrupted and we didn't get a conclusion. I'm not sure why. I think it's because this arc wasn't finished around the time this game was being developed. This also explains why there are certain Shippuden characters that are missing, because they weren't introduced at the time, and it's also why they added the Black Shadow arc, just so Master Mode wasn't too short. You can also play Hero Mode, which is basically Hero's History from Ultimate Ninja 3, but better. The graphics are better polished, and now in between the battles, you can watch several cutscenes that offer bits of dialogue and descriptions from the perspective of a certain character, which thankfully offer a lot more context than Hero's History. I know a lot more about what was going on in the Search for Tsunade arc, unlike before when I was just flooded with unanswered questions. Now granted, they did still cut off a bunch of stuff from the Chunin exams, and it's kind of inconvenient that we have to collect pieces of items in Master Mode to unlock the story segments. I mean sure, it makes the game more challenging, but wouldn't it be a lot more appropriate to have the players experience the entire story before the Kazekage rescue arc and then play Master Mode? Although to be fair, I think this is only a big deal for people who only own the Ultimate Ninja 4 game, since you can experience the history by playing the previous games. Also, this ended up being beneficial after buying Ultimate Ninja 5. And speaking of which, something I did not know until someone tweeted at me is that Ultimate Ninja 5 was not released in the US. You know, I always whine out of jealousy for not living in North America, a sad reality that ends up restricting me from access to certain stuff. But for the first time, I'm happy that I didn't live there, because Ultimate Ninja 5 was the first game that got me into both the Ultimate Ninja series and the Naruto franchise as a whole. Also, I think this was the result of not having a US release. You don't have the option to choose English voices, so if you're attached to them, you're pretty much screwed. Personally, I always choose the Japanese voices, and I'm almost glad that it doesn't have English voices because A, I don't have to go to the settings and change the voices because for some reason English is always set in default when you buy it, and B, I don't have to listen to Naruto's English voice in the title screen as he screams Ultimate Ninja. Anyway, this one doesn't have hero mode, which to be fair, the graphics improvement isn't really that significant, so remastering hero mode would just be pointless. But you know what they do have that Ultimate Ninja 4 doesn't? Hinata Hyuga from Shippuden. Look, I know I sound like a 12-year-old, but just look at this ultimate jutsu. In battles, you now have the option to choose a partner, and you can choose whether or not their attacks are automatic or manual. Honestly, I'm more used to one-on-one battles, which is unfortunately not an option in versus mode, although I'm not gonna act all salty because again, I can play with Hinata from Shippuden, and the background music from the Hidden Leaf Village arena is absolutely joyful to listen. It's nostalgic and really well composed. As for Master Mode, it starts from the beginning of the Kazekage Rescue arc, and so as a result we're forced to relive the events of Ultimate Ninja 4 with a few minor alterations, and yeah, it kind of sucks that you have to witness Naruto reunite with his friends again, but for me, I had just recently played Hero Mode, so I'm kinda just continuing the narrative. It was a thrilling arc nonetheless. One of my favorite parts was playing with Sakura, as she tries to prove that she can be more useful after she did jack shit during the Sasuke's retrieval arc, although a few sources told me that she became useless again. It was fun until it lasted, I guess. And I did also like how this mission was too personal for Naruto, since he's a Jinchuriki like Gaara, and this mission was also meant to test whether or not he can save his friends, since last time he couldn't save Sasuke. The second arc was also cool and all. It was fun seeing Orochimaru again, and we saw Naruto transform into the Four-Tails Fox state, which made him completely red and devoid of control. Although that didn't last very long and he eventually returned to his natural state. And then we finally fought against the big boy, the long-awaited former friend Sasuke Uchiha, and now he's even more lost than before. I mean, I would argue that he's not lost depending on what we define as lost. In terms of the differences between the previous game and this one, the streets are slightly more spaced, and thankfully we can rotate the camera. Unlike before when it was only in a few locations where you could rotate it, you can now walk in teams and even change what teammate you want to command. The controls are a little bit different, mostly for the better. Now if you want to interact with a person or object, or you want to enter somewhere, you have to click circle, which I think makes it easier not to confuse jumping with interaction in certain scenarios. And if you want to smash a box, you have to click square. Now, I'm not fond of all of the changes. For instance, you can't perform a shadow blow or shadow clone jump, which is the saddest thing ever. Also now, you have the option to run away from fighting against bandits, unlike before when they would just show up out of nowhere and you couldn't predict when, which was kind of annoying. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about this change, so while they did improve on that, for some reason whenever they do catch you and you have to fight them, we're transferred to a battlefield, which is something I don't like. I like it better when I would fight in the exact same location where I encountered them. The battle music is a lot better though. But you know, Ultimate Ninja 5 is a good game, but there is one little detail unrelated to the actual gameplay that makes me respect this game beyond any reasonable measures. I don't think I ever got to talk about the opening sequences before the title screen. They're pretty much just a compilation of cutscenes in Ultimate Jutsu, but with Ultimate Ninja 4 and 5, there's something special. Around the end of the opening in the fourth game, we witness a sequence of leaves falling to Naruto as he rests peacefully, which I think is a perfect description of the scenario he was in, not only because he was resting, but he was also doing what he likes doing, which is training to become stronger. Then we get to the opening of the fifth game. Just like before, around the end we witness a portion of the scene where Naruto awakened, and as his body was heating up because of the transformation, we saw a green leaf heading towards his direction and burn the moment it touched him, reflecting how he was in the exact opposite state of peaceful, as he was instead filled with rage over Sasuke and Orochimaru.
Nakama 一人救えねえやつが火影になんてなれるかよ。